We'll start the process with a 5-minute opening statement, and then I'll alternate asking the candidates questions. We're going to start this event with Chief Ronald Walsh. Chief, please provide a brief introduction of yourself. Tell the community members who are watching why you want to be the next police commissioner for the city of Long Beach. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ron Walsh. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to come and join the city in helping to select a new commissioner of police for your police department. You know, many people don't know it, but I actually got my start right down here in the city of Long Beach as an auxiliary police officer when I graduated high school, volunteering my time. I spent 2 years up on the boardwalk as a summer special. When I graduated college, I joined the United States Department of Justice. I spent 2 years working at a 26 Federal Plaza as a special agent in Manhattan. I joined the New York City Police Department and graduated valedictorian out of their academy. And I spent, 3 years right across the border in Far Rockaway. In 1992, I was asked to join the Nassau County Police Department. I again graduated valedictorian, and I spent the first 11 years of my career right on either side of Long Beach, in Atlantic Beach, Point Lookout, and over in Island Park. 11 years. I grew up down here in Long Beach. My grandparents lived on Park Avenue. I used to run up and down Virginia Avenue to the beach all the time. I have family down here. Uncles, aunts, cousins. They own business. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. Just like I know many of you. You know, I've been asked that question a lot, why I want to be the next commissioner of the city of Long Beach. I have a great job, a lot of prestige, great salary. I want to impart upon each and every one of you that this is a calling for me. This isn't a job. It's not about the money for me. It's about service. And I have a vision, and I've had a vision for a long time. I've had a vision of leading a police department at the very highest levels, showing the world that a police department can be so close to its community that, when an issue or a problem comes up in the community, there's no waiting for data. That information comes in because we have such a close relationship with our community. It comes into the police department so that seamlessly becomes a goal and objective for the police department to solve as part of a team with its city, with you, the residents. I've learned a lot about building trust. And trust isn't something that you give. Trust is something that you earn. And I will rededicate this police department to earning your trust every single day by being accountable to our actions, by being inclusive to everything that we do. Your voice matters. By being transparent, no hidden agendas, and by being authentic in every time we communicate. By engendering into the membership of this police department that every single encounter with you matters. And it's an opportunity for us to build another relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, I love what I do, and I do it because I love it, not because I have to. And I believe that this city deserves to have a model police department, a police department that other organizations around this country should be looking at as a best practice. Me as your commissioner, I promise you that the rest of this country will be looking to us, to the city of Long Beach. What are they doing? How come they're so close with their community? How come they don't have the uprising that everyone else has? Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to answering all of your questions. And God willing, being your next commissioner of police. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. Interim Commissioner Ragona, please provide a brief introduction about yourself. Tell the community members who are watching why you want to be the permanent police commissioner for the city of Long Beach. You have 5 minutes.
Sure thing. I'd start off by saying good evening, Mr. Peterson, Chief Walsh. It's nice to see both of you, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I've been working for the city of Long Beach for 34 and a half years. The first 27 and a half was as sworn members of this police department. In 1986, I started off as a police officer for the Long Beach Police Department. In 2003, I was promoted to sergeant, where I served as a desk sergeant, as an outside supervisor, supervising the police officers on my tour on their day-to-day activities. In 2007, I was promoted to lieutenant. I was fortunate enough to be assigned as the commanding officer of our patrol force. At that time, I was in charge of all the uniformed members of the police department, the police officers, the sergeants. 2012, I was designated the deputy executive officer, the number 3 man in the department. I was also appointed as the commanding officer of our traffic division. And finally, just before retiring in 2013, I was named the executive officer of the department. And I was also promoted to the rank of inspector. When I left the police department in 2013 and retired, several months later, the city contacted me and they asked me if I'd come back. I'd come back as the director of the Ocean Beach Park. It was a big source of revenue and they needed someone to head it. I had no intention of coming back to work, but the city asked me. If my city needed me, well, you could bet I was going to be there, and I sure was. So I came back. And I've been doing that since the summer of 2014 till I was named interim commissioner in June of 2020. And I'm very proud to say that I put a tremendous amount of integrity controls in place. Every beach pass was counted, all 341,000. There were Microsoft Excel sheets that were made that accounted for any discrepancies that we had. Well, I'm proud to say that in 2014, our revenue went up every year. And ultimately, the year before I took over in 2013, the revenue for Beach Park was $3.1 million. In 2016, we had a record high of $4.5 million. It's not because I'm a terrific marketer. It's because I love this city and I made sure I did everything in my power to make sure that we got every penny that we should get and that the integrity of the department was upheld. When I was asked to come back as the interim commissioner, the first thing I said to the city was, I know you reduced the salary, that's fine, but I won't work for that. And I got a little bit of a quizzical look and I said, no, that's still too much. Reduce my salary by 30% of what you're already offering. It's not about money. It's not about a title. Like I said earlier, I've had that title. I have a very fancy retirement ring that says that I've been there before. Why am I here and why do I want to be commissioner? Because I've served this city for 34 plus years. I'm dedicated, I'm loyal, and I'm passionate. When I took over in June, the police department was decimated. We were short supervisors, we were short police officers. We had no command staff. I rectified all of that. I made supervisors with the authority of the city. I filled the spots that we needed. I created a total command staff. Now the department's moving forward. Everything is moving in the right direction, and it's certainly no time to take our foot off the gas. We're heading up. Let's not stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ragona. So we're going to stay with you, Commissioner. Recently, there have been many conversations, not only in Long Beach, but nationwide, relating to community policing. What do you believe are the essential elements of an effective community policing program?
A true collaborative effort between the community and the police department. Talk is very cheap, and the word community policing gets thrown out like it's candy. And the fact of the matter is, that's rhetoric. Since I stepped into the position in June, I have reached out personally and have met with pretty much every civic group in the city, because I know the city, I know the civics, I know the leaders. I know what each one of our community needs because I've been here for 34 years pounding the streets. Our West End neighbors, well, that's a beautiful residential community divided by a business district with restaurants and licensed premises. Their needs and their desires and their wants from the police department are different from other communities. You have bars, you have loud people in the street, you have parking conditions, you have fights. There's a whole host of issues. And I meet with the West End neighbors to make sure I address that. I've done it numerous times since I've been back. North Park, it's another community. They have their issues. There's a basic distrust between the community and the police department, as has been voiced to me by the civics. Well, I'm bridging that gap. We're meeting. We're addressing the issues that they have. Our police officers are out in the community now, meeting and talking with the community. They need to be there. south side of town, there by the boardwalk. There's a whole host of issues on the beach, the boardwalk, Broadway, the business districts throughout town, the canals, kids that are congregating in the business district down east that are on the canals, on the walkovers and the bridges, creating problems. I've met with all these civics, and community policing is about working together in a partnership. And I formed that allegiance and partnership with these community groups. And we're moving forward to make sure that we work together to solve their issues and to make sure that we police them the way they need to be policed. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ragona, as a follow-up, I know you've been meeting with a bunch of different groups. So how does that translate to your officers?
So as I said earlier, I created my command staff. My command staff sits in on my meetings with me. Our command staff then reaches out to our first line supervisors, many of which were just promoted. And we make sure that they know what's demanded and expected of our officers. We do roll call at the station house. Unlike Nassau County where they meet, the officers meet, they actually turn out at different locations on their post or their sector. We turn out and we do roll call training. So our officers are all spoken to and given assignments and told what's going on within the community at roll call. It's one-on-one. We speak to each other. It's very easy to exchange information, and it's done daily at every roll call.
Great. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Chief Walsh.
Yes.
Same question. Conversations around community policing. What do you believe are the essential elements of an effective community policing program?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about the way you phrased the question, Gary. I don't believe that community policing is a program. I believe community policing is a philosophy on how we interact with the public and how we also manage ourselves internally as a police department. We need to build trust, and trust comes through the application of, well, being authentic, inclusive, accountable, and transparent, and truly listening to people. Building those bridges within our communities so that they trust us, they know us. Our officers parking their cars, getting out, talking to the community, bringing that feedback into the police department, right through to the command staff, so that each and every one of us know what sort of interaction they're having on the ground level with our officers on the street. The resiliency of a relationship builds bridges. It builds legitimacy. It builds trust. And trust, like I said in my opening statements, that's not something you just walk up and ask for. That's something you earn. My idea, my focus, what that philosophy will be, is to refocus the Long Beach Police Department on becoming a learning organization, an organization that has a collaborative culture, one that bonds with its community, dedicated to constant improvement, where innovation and forward thinking become the norm through partnership and teamwork. How about working with our youth community and building a relationship there, and not letting our homegrown talent go to other police departments instead of coming inside of ours, where we share our ideas and our experience, and we strive towards a culture of excellence. That's probably the best way I can say it, is community policing engenders a culture of excellence in a police department to be on the course of ever improvement and ever striving to have better relationships and ensuring that we are the guardians in a police for a community, and that we're constantly working in a collaborative partnership with them so that they are actually getting the type of service that they want from their community. Thank you.
Okay, as a follow-up, Chief Walsh, you talk a lot about building bridges and building trust.
Sure.
How is that going to translate to the line level? So you build some trust, you build some bridges. What's that going to do for you?
The first thing it does is it gives everyone in the community the knowledge of who their officers are. How does that translate? How about because we give geographic responsibility in the city to the post officers, where they actually are now responsible for the conditions on their post. And we train them in problem solving to get to the root cause of the problem instead of just putting that Band-Aid on the wound. It's time to start figuring out, how do we solve drugs at the railroad station? instead of tolerating it, or people peddling drugs at Stop and Shop in the parking lot, or bicycles that keep on getting stolen out of the West Home area, the cars that get broken into, or the disenfranchised feeling that we have in North Park, or 3 o'clock in the morning, the bars not being, well, responsible neighbors to the people who live there and giving them the quality of life that they've been learning to have. Our officers need to be engaged with every single member of this community through and through, and take responsibility for the postcard and for what their actual post assignment is, and work towards getting to the root of the problem in, well, the SARA model. It's a technical term that they use in problem-oriented policing, but it's scanning, analyzing, coming up with resolve, revisiting the problem until you finally get to the root of the issue. That's the way you do it. And that's how it translates into the boots on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. This was a question from the community, and we're going to start with Interim Commissioner Ragona. Should Long Beach PD roll out tasers for its officers to give them another non-lethal option?
Sure. If I can, I'll get to that in 1 second. Just to address something that was just said, if I may. Having a steady sector and a steady post, I wouldn't expect Chief Walsh to know, because he's not here, obviously. We do have steady sectors, steady posts. All police officers do own and have ownership of their posts. So the same police officer works the same sector every day. And they do condition reports. They do what we call, and I said it earlier, park, talk, and walk. I have the officers getting out of their car on this steady sector, walking and talking. So the fact of the matter is that really is being addressed. They are moving forward, and you may think I'm biased, but I truly feel that we have the finest police officers in Long Island and the state. In regards to your question about a taser and tasers, again, we have tasers. Our officers are assigned tasers, and we do use them. It's a tremendous tool, a non-lethal tool that we use and that we have, and we've been trained for many, many years in it. As a matter of fact, I was the first one as a sergeant to get tasered when we got trained in it, and I can tell you, it certainly is very, very effective. So we do use them. We have highly trained officers who are trained in many ways to use non-lethal force.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. Chief Walsh, the summer months on the West End is littered with people who are publicly intoxicated, making it not ideal place for children. The problem has been bad for a long time. How would you approach such a problem?
Well, the first thing I would probably do is starting to open up those lines of communication with the business owners down there and teaching them about how to be responsible in serving alcohol, monitoring the people who are buying alcohol, and making sure that they're not being overserved. The other thing I would do is educate the public and start letting them know that that type of behavior isn't going to be tolerated down here in Long Beach, that we're a family community, and that we need you to respect the rules down here. You know, there's a thing called the State Liquor Authority. If you have an establishment down on the West End that's really not working with and being good neighbors, you bring in the State Liquor Authority. I did a lot of that work when I was a problem-oriented policing officer. I brought the State Liquor Authority down, the building department, the fire marshals. You start checking occupancy rates. You start making sure that the buildings are up to code. Because if you're not going to be a good neighbor, we're going to make sure that you're in total compliance of everything. I got news for you. The State Liquor Authority hits you with a fine, you know it, because it's expensive, very expensive. But more importantly, I think the culture down on the West End, every business should have a right to make money, right? That's what they're here for. It's good for the city to have business. It's good for the city. It brings in revenue. But you know what? We can learn to work together in partnership so that they're more responsible in the way they go about things, and also maybe adjust the expectations of people when they're coming down here. Long Beach isn't just a party town. It's a family town. It's a place where you need to respect us. You don't just walk around and urinate in the streets or in someone's side yard because you feel like it. Or where you don't put a row of porta potties under someone's window. That's not the way things work. That happened down in the West End. Some of the complaints that, well, when I was speaking to the head of the West End Civic Association, they told me. And it's about building partnerships, Gary. It really is. It's about getting this community to work together for the same goals, for the quality of life that this city wants to have for itself. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Ragona. Currently, what are you doing to improve the department's relationship with marginalized communities?
The communities that we have that feel they're marginalized, and specifically the North Park community, we've made a very concerted effort to meet with their civic and community groups. Matter of fact, I've met with the North Park Crisis Intervention Team 4 times since I've been in the position that I'm in. We listen to them, find out what their needs are and how we can better work with them and build that trust. Part of the park talk and walk that I talked about earlier is in our North Park community. We have directed patrols twice a tour, on every tour, in the areas where we can make the biggest difference and the most significant connection with the community. We have our officers walking down on the side of the railroad every day, twice a day. They go down and there's homeless there. We work directly with the Coalition for the Homeless. They've come out and walked with us at least 3 times that I know in the last 2 months that I've counted. They've been working with us. We go down through the MLK Center and the communities. Our officers are out of the car. We want them to know that the police officers are their friends. I have a program which I'm ready to roll out. It's called Adopt a Cop. The Adopt a Cop program is a program that's worked in other communities. We have our post officers go into the schools, into the elementary schools, especially in disenfranchised communities. And we talk to the kids. At first, they're apprehensive. They may tell you one of their families were arrested by a police officer. They don't trust the police. But I promise you, I've watched the other models and how they work. And eventually you win the trust of these young adults. And they become older and they trust us and they want to work with us. So how do I deal with the disenfranchised? We reach out and we make sure they know we're there for them.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Chief Walsh.
Yes.
Question for you. Surveillance by manned patrols is very expensive. How would you utilize technology such as portable cameras or drones, and where might they be used, and what are the pros and cons of using that type of equipment?
It's very interesting. As part of the division that I run right now is in charge of those technological innovations. There are cameras all over Long Beach. As a matter of fact, they about 2 years ago they signed a contract with the Vigilon, which Motorola just bought, to actually do analytics on their video. There's license plate readers in this town too. Drone technology. Well, that's something you have to be a little bit careful with. The Nassau County Police Department, one of the things that I actually helped with was actually working with our drones. It came out of our Chief of Patrol's office, but during the protests, we used drone technology to monitor the crowds and then see what directions they were going in, and use that to inform our police officers on the street that were working the protests on what directions the crowd were heading. So that's a way to do it. But you need to integrate all of your technology so that you can actually have what's called data-driven or intelligence-led driven policing. Taking your video camera, your license plate reader information. What better way than to catch a burglar than you have his license plate, what time he entered the town if he came in from out of town. And you use that data in those areas where houses might have been burglarized to start to narrow down who may have been the car that came in and victimized our community. But beyond that, the integration of that technology can give you predictive analysis. You take all of your data and all the information and all the outreach that you're doing in the community, and you bring it all together so that you can predict where you think crime is going to happen with a pretty good degree of accuracy, so that we can prevent crimes from happening before the quality of life in this city goes down. That's how you're going to use that technology, but responsibly, and certainly with the feedback from the community where it's deployed. It's important to get their feedback so that they know and understand the types of technology that we're using in the police department to help better their lives and partner with them.
And so, playing devil's advocate,
Sure.
what do you say to residents who are concerned about their privacy with the cameras. So privacy, and secondarily, with the license plate readers, sometimes we may stop people that weren't the person, and you may snare, you may entangle someone, particularly people of color. How is that going to be perceived by the community?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, when you're out in a public place, these cameras are only videoing areas that are public. They're not put in places where they catch you on your own property or in your own living room or tracking your vehicle around town. That's not what they're used for. And you have to be very careful when you use the data, especially for what you just said, Gary. If you have yourself and you're only using that data based on race, well, that's biased. And I'm so against that. That will never happen under my police department, because you know what? Persons of color are outraged right now for the way they've been treated in communities across the United States. And we need to be ever vigilant to ensure that everything that we do in this city is not only above board, but blind to race, ensuring that nothing that we do is affecting disenfranchised community unfairly or unjustly. And we should be monitoring the summonses that we give. Are we being even-handed? Are we writing the appropriate numbers of summonses based upon the size of the population? And if we're not, we need to have a hard look and see what we're doing and why we're doing it. There's a lot of technology out there, Gary, and that technology needs to be used fairly, justly, and transparently, so that the people of this community know that we're fair and we're just, and you can trust us. That's where the work comes in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Commissioner Ragona, I've heard a lot about trust and fairness, and those are ideals in policing that we all try to live up to. But across America, we haven't lived up to that standard to the fullest degree. What's your understanding of the history of racism and policing in America?
Well, I think factually, racism exists. And I believe racism has existed in the police world. I am a big proponent for the police reform that's going on right now and the mandates that we have from Governor Cuomo. All police departments in this state are required by April of 2021 to have their police reform plan in place. And we're at the forefront of it. When I started here in June, I hit the ground with my feet running, beginning to do our part for police reform. I've already reauthored our use of force policy to make sure that chokeholds were banned. No longer. It wasn't in there. I redid our policy for domestic incidents. I made sure everything was included to make sure that our victims were protected. We're in front of it. We're doing what we need to do to make sure that it doesn't exist now. Our police officers are well trained. Racism will never be tolerated. So our officers are trained consistently and regularly, and our supervisors are out there supervising. So has it existed? Absolutely. Has it been problematic? I'm sure it has. In our police department here in the city of Long Beach, our police officers are professionals, and I truly, from the bottom of my heart, don't believe we have a racist on this police department.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief Walsh,
Yes.
kind of along the same lines, what's your understanding of the history of racism in policing across America? And what are some of the things that you can do to mitigate that if it does exist in policing?
Well, when you look at a historical perspective, I mean, it goes right back to the Jim Crow laws that existed in this country for over 100 years. I mean, the government used the police department to enforce segregation on buses and schools and water fountains and restaurants. There was structural bias that were built into the titles of homes here on Long Island, where you weren't even allowed to sell a home to someone of color or a minority group. That's systemic bias and institutional bias. There's a reason that the people of color in this country feel as if they've been taken advantage of and they've been held back, because they have. That no longer exists in my world. I wasn't brought up that way. My family, well, we never looked at anybody with color. We looked at everybody as the value of the person that they were. Policing, I want to point out something I did in the police academy. When I took over that academy, they had never heard the term of implicit bias. I brought implicit bias training into this police academy, and we do it still today. In case any of you at home don't know what that is, that's the unconscious bias that people have where they don't even realize that they have a bias against certain people or certain groups or minorities. Every single one of us have it. I brought that into the police department, working with Laurie Friedel and Harvard University, exposing every one of the officers to the Harvard University studies. So they took the test themselves. And the Black people and the Hispanic people could not believe that they were biased themselves. So what does that do? You make yourselves aware that that exists. All of the studies say you can't cure it. You can't take it out of you because it seems to be implicit inside of you. What you can do is you slow down the decision-making process long enough that you say, hey, am I making the right decision here because of the facts or because it's my knee-jerk reaction? And if it's a knee-jerk reaction, that's where the training comes in. That's where you say, well, I trained, they understood, I know how to overcome this, I slow it down, I now apply fairness and justness, look at the facts of the situation, and man, you better make sure you're doing it right, because people's civil rights should never be violated. We're a country of principles, of morals, and of ethics, and our police department needs to be the line between just and unjust behavior, and we should never, ever have to worry in the city of Long Beach that any one of our officers is that way. I've never seen evidence of it, and I can assure you, that training that I brought into the Nassau County Police Department, I'm a certified New York State instructor. I'm going to train them myself. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Ragona, do you have anything to add on that topic?
I do. I agree with a lot of things that Chief Walsh says in regards to bias and in regards to racism. And the fact of the matter is everybody could do better and everybody can make sure that they're trained properly. And our officers are trained properly. We have our own certified trainers here in our police department who additionally do training regularly with our police officers in regards. So I agree with them, a lot of valid points, and I'm very proud of our department. I stand by the fact that I think we have very unbiased officers.
Great. Thank you, sir. Let me ask this, since we're on the topic of race, let me ask you, and I'll start with Commissioner Ragona this time. What's your stance? This is a community question. What's your stance on Black Lives Matter? And if a peaceful protester was confronted by an aggressive counter protester, like we've seen throughout the island, what steps would you hope that your officers would take to handle that situation?
We've lived it. So our job is to serve and protect. And every citizen, every resident has the right for a peaceful demonstration and protest. There were people who died in war for that right. So the facts of the matter are, you have a right to do that. I think the operative and the key words are peaceful. When the law gets broken, our job is to make sure that the violator is held accountable. That's what we do. During this summer, we had numerous protests in the city of Long Beach for police reform, Black Lives Matter. There was a pretense of something called the Sunrise Watching, which is large gatherings of anti-social, non-socially distanced lawbreakers. And we took care of that. So if we saw a crime being committed or a violation, no matter what side of the political stance it was, our job is to independently and objectively uphold the law and take care of that situation. And if a law is broken, that person will be taken into custody.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's what you guys did?
Pardon me?
And that's what you guys did this summer?
That's what we did this summer, correct.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Okay. So Chief Walsh, this is another community question.
Sure.
Are you open to social workers working within the department?
There's a lot of talk about that lately. I'm open to any help that the police department can get to help do their job better and more effectively. So social workers in the police department and police officers have over the years evolved into social workers and caseworkers and, everything under the sun. We've been called upon. We are the face of government, and the 911 is dialed when people are in need. And we welcome that. But if there's a way, and I'm not sure what this way is, but that's where innovation comes in, and that's where a culture of excellence and a learning institution comes in. If there's a way where we can take some of the work that shouldn't be police officers, like, for instance, someone who is a repeated mental aided, if you will, someone who has a mental condition where they're constantly calling the police, and we can bring a social worker resource involved in that to work with that family and work with that individual to ensure that they're getting the help that they need so that they're not a police problem anymore and not affecting the neighborhood. Well, of course, we're open to that. I'm open to any help to give police officers the resources they need to get the job done and to create the quality of life in this community that you not only want, that you demand from the leadership and from your department and your government. That's what building a team is all about.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Ragona, same question. Are you open to having a social worker work within the department?
So it's kind of near and dear to me. I graduated college with my bachelor's degree in political science and sociology. One of my first jobs out of the box, I was a caseworker for the city of New York. I worked over at the men's shelter at Bellevue Hospital. And additionally, I was a New York State correctional officer working at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. I've seen both gamuts of it. I'm probably the most moderate police officer you'll meet. As far as a caseworker, I know their value in social workers, and there is a value to them, a very strong value. Do I believe they should be out there doing enforcement? Absolutely not. We're trained to do the enforcement. Do I think that they can be a tremendous asset to the police department in assisting in many different issues and problems we have? Definitely. Mental illness is rampant. Mental illness is what's behind a lot of crimes that are committed, as we all know. If we can get them help, if we can work with them to try and get them the psychiatric help they need, the therapy that they need, through a caseworker, through a social worker, we're all better. It'll stop recidivism. If we can get to them and get them the help they need, that crime might not happen again. So yes, to answer your question, I've lived it. I understand what they do, and I truly value what they do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to stay with you, Commissioner Ragona. There's a question from the community. Some residents, first it's a statement, some residents are too intimidated to call the police department for services. How would you change that?
I think it goes back to the community policing and bridging the gaps that are out there. That fear is real. I address my officers, and one of the things I tell them, if you're in a store, you're in the 7-Eleven, and police officers tend to be a little cynical, it comes with the trade. Someone walks in and says, "Good morning, officer." A simple nod of the head, well, that doesn't cut it. That leads to that divide that I'm talking about. So when that citizen, that resident, that consumer comes into the store and says, "Good morning, officer," my officers know you turn around and you say, "Good morning, how are you today?" And I think by taking the mystique and the fear out of the uniform and the gun with the community, it leads our residents to want to call us and trust us. So we have to be out in the community. We have to reach out, and our residents have to know we're there for them. Don't look at the garb. Don't look at the shiny shield, the gun, the police car. Look at us as someone who can come there and help you and solve your problems. So it starts with us being out there, talking to groups, talking to residents, doing that park talk and walk that I spoke about. We need to be out there, and they need to know that we're their friends. We're not their foes.
Great. Thank you, Interim Commissioner. Chief Walsh, next question is for you.
Great.
While you do have some connections to Long Beach, you are an outsider. by some measure. If you're selected for this position, how will you earn the respect and trust of the department? And then the follow-up is going to be in the community.
Sure. Well, first of all, within the police department, I don't know if the residents of the community know, I believe that started today. Today, we had a virtual Skype meeting where I got to talk to each one of the members of the police department, and they heard a lot of the things from me that I'm saying to you tonight. But in my very first days, my goal is going to be to meet every single one of those police officers and get them to learn who I am, not only as a person, as a father, parent, as a member of this community, as a person, and as their leader. It's more important that I learn them, that I learn who they are as people, that I learn what they're all about, what they're seeing in the community, what are their issues and needs, what do I need to do to make their jobs easier, to give them the tools that they need to go out and give service in the community the way the community wants it. Because the better service they can provide to this community, the better support we're going to get in return. The exact same thing I will do outside of this community. Right away, you're going to see I'm not somebody who sits behind my desk. I probably shouldn't even have a desk. I'll be out, I'll be working in the street, meeting with the community members. And earlier on, you posed a question to the commissioner about the disenfranchised. Sure, I'm going to reach out into each and every one of those civic groups. And of course, those are the people who are involved. But my main focus is going to try and reach those people who aren't involved, who have never had that opportunity to meet with us and talk with us and share with us and learn that, well, we're people too, and we have a job. And our job is way more important than us as individuals. It's a higher calling. It's so important that we establish those relationships, because those are the reasons why, as the commissioner pointed out, this police department doesn't have a close relationship in the North Park area. And some of the reasons why the systemic problems that he's spoken about haven't been solved long-term. Because I don't believe that enough information and enough partnering and enough trust has been built in this community for us to be able to sit down across the table over dinner, have a cup of coffee, and work through our issues and problems and come up with those compromises that make the quality of life down here exactly what every single member of the community wants. And as the commissioner says, there are 5 distinct communities down here in Long Beach, and each and every one of them has their specific needs and wants to be addressed as a goal for this police department. They'll know that I'm here because each one of the cops will be re-engaged into that culture of excellence that I've been speaking about, becoming that model for every single one of us to have and to look at and to say, well, that's how you do it. Look at how great it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. Going to the next question. Start with Commissioner Ragona. There's been a lot of talk about accountability in policing throughout the nation, and a lot of it has been around the lack of accountability. So my question for you first is, when will you know, what signs will tell you you have a department that has a culture of accountability?
Sure. So when I came here in June, one of the first things I did was check out our staffing. What was our manpower like? And I saw that we were extremely short on first-line supervisors, our sergeants. Those are the people who oversee and hold our officers accountable for what they do. I took an inventory. I went to the city. I said, we need 4 sergeants. We're filling spots with overtime, or we're just not filling the supervisor spots. And talking about accountability, you don't have that if there's not a supervisor out there supervising. The city agreed. And I'm very proud to say that I was able to promote 4 sergeants. The first female sergeant in the history of the city of Long Beach. The second sergeant was the first Hispanic female in the city of Long Beach. And we promoted an African-American sergeant, the second African-American sergeant in the history of this city. And I'm very proud of the diversity I was able to introduce into our supervisory ranks. So when you talk about accountability, I've now staffed those spots. Our sergeants have gone to sergeant school. They're out there. They know what they need to do. They know their officers need to be accountable. They answer directly to their commanding officers who answer to me. So there's a hierarchy and there's a chain of command. They know very explicitly what's expected and demanded from them. And if they don't do the right thing, they'll know they'll be held accountable. As a matter of fact, when I came in, I revamped our civilian complaint process. I made sure that every complaint was not only documented in our impact system, forwarded to a commanding officer in real time as we got it, that the information for the Public Corruptions Bureau in the Nassau County DA's office was provided to that complainant in case they felt uncomfortable dealing with a local police department. And within one day, every commanding officer has to start researching and seeing what was done. So accountability is extremely important if you're going to have a professional police department. And I think I've taken every step in the 4 months that I've been here to make sure that our officers are held accountable for their actions to a superior officer.
Great. Thank you, Interim Commissioner Ragona. Same question to Chief Walsh. How will you know when you have a department that has a culture of accountability?
I think that's a great question. I have a little bit different view on that. To me, I'm going to know that the culture of accountability is here when our officers themselves come forward and say, boss, I made a mistake. I need to fix this one. Well, they now know at a call. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had a time where I went up to a man. I got a call in Cedarhurst for a man the man was breaking into a parking meter. I went up to that man and I approached him. I says, hey, what are you doing? This guy spun around and blew up at me. What, a black man can't be in Cedarhurst, going off. So it went back then, the feelings back then, right? I slowed it down. I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm here because I got a call here. I'm not here because you're black. I'm not here because you're in Cedarhurst. Do you know what happened? It turns out that man was hunched over a parking meter. It was a call for him breaking into a parking meter, leaning on his car with the hanger, trying to get in because he locked his keys in his car. I looked at this man and I said, hey man, I said, do you want me to call you a tow truck? You would have been amazed to watch it melt on that hot summer day in Cedarhurst and how just that right there. I said, I'm sorry that you felt that way. I said, that's not what we're all about down here. I said, we're about responding to calls for service and providing service. I said, do you need help? It was as if the light bulb went on. It was amazing to watch the change. That's accountability. That's recognizing that people sometimes don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We have to make that known. People should know why we're going to a call for service. Beyond that, our officers should be taking responsibility if they make a mistake. That's what I was talking about when I said community policing is internal as well as external. Because inside this department, we need to trust one another to the point where we can come forward and say what we did without having to worry that it's going to be used against us. And if you broke a rule and you did something where you have to be held accountable and be disciplined, well, that's not the end of the world. That's a learning opportunity. Every time I failed, you know when I built my character? Through my failures. It's easy to win. But to lose and to learn and to build character and learn from those experiences, that's how you know you have accountability. That's how you know that this department is working well. When each and every one of us are working together, and you know what should have happened in Minneapolis, in George Floyd? Those cops should have pulled him off. There should have been a culture where they grabbed that guy, took him off of him and said, what are you doing? You're choking him. And they should have saved his life. That's a culture of accountability. That's how you know. That's where we need to be.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Commissioner Ragona, you already started answering this question, but I'm going to go ahead and pose it so you can more fully explain about the the governor's reforms. So the question is, as you know, Long Beach is required to implement Governor Cuomo's directives on police reform and reinvention, due April 1st, 2021. Formally, what have you done to start the planning process? Who's involved in that process? And where are you guys in that process?
So again, when I came in June, I wanted to hit the ground running because this was an extremely important reform. On June 12th, when our governor said, and he mandated that we all have to have this reform policy in place by April 1st, I understood the magnitude and the importance of it. One of the first things I did, as I said earlier, was to rewrite our use of force policy, then our domestic incident policy. Part of it is to reach out and have a community forum, which I've done. I've reached out to the rabbis, the priests, the pastors, the Nassau County ADA's office, and the Legal Aid Bureau, which are required to have a think tank to sit down and try and figure out what we can do better with this reform and what our police departments can do better to work with the community. And that's mandated by the governor. I'm working with my command staff. My inspector, Rich DePalma, is in charge. He's running with this and has been in constant contact with the PAC committee from Nassau County, with Commissioner Pat Ryder from Nassau County, as all the villages are. And we're working together, all of us, to make sure that we're on the same page and our reforms throughout Nassau County are the ones that should be done and that the governor wants us to have done. I truly expect us to be done with all our reforms and have our package to present way before probably most of the villages and possibly the county. We're in front of it. We're doing it now. I realize the absolute importance of this police reform and getting it done and getting it done properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Commissioner Ragona. Chief Walsh, same question. With respect to Governor Cuomo's directives on police reform and reinvention, which the plan is due April 1st, 2021. Formally, what have you been involved in and done in the planning process? Who's involved and where are you guys?
It's great that you asked that question, Gary. This is the commissioner's reform. I have it right here on my desk because I bring it home with me because we're working on it so diligently in the Nassau County Police Department. I'm on a committee right now. Commissioner Ryder took all of our division chiefs and many other people involved in the department. We have to review every single policy. Every agency has to review every single policy that they have to ensure there's no language in there or anything tilted bias in any way, that it truly is a collaborative way. We have to start posting our domestic incidents. We have to go through our domestic incident policy, our bias incident policy, our mental aided policy. We have to have a policy on crowd control now. Nassau County reached out to the International Association of Chiefs of Police, got their model policy, used that as the basis to start ours, and then we went through committee over and over and over again, that policy, and tailored to our own. When I get back to work on Thursday, we're going through our mental aided policy to finalize it. Not only that, the website here in Long Beach, it has to reflect summonses. It has to reflect the gender, age, and race of the people who are getting tickets and where those tickets are issued so that the public will know if there is an unfair bias in the application of summonses and the way they're being applied in neighborhoods. Not only that, your use of force needs to be published and needs to be on there saying where we use force, why we used force, and the gender and race of the people that force was used against and why. There's a ton of things in this document. But most importantly, it has to be put in front of the community for the community to approve, not approve it, to have input into the plan. But then it goes in front of the legislative body, here the city council, to be approved. Then it works its way up to Albany. There's a lot of work to be done in these reforms, and there's 130 or so pages in there that you have to go through word for word and really compare and make sure. Does anybody here know that you have to establish a commissioner's community council so that the members of the community have the input to come in, and that you have to institute problem-oriented policing and community policing? Not only do they want it, they want to know your policy on it. And they want committed feedback forms to work through the police department. Things that I've been saying for years are finally coming to roost. Implicit bias training. I brought that in 2014 in Nassau County, and we're redoubling our efforts. All of these things, the governor is saying, were things that we've been doing in Nassau County for so many years. It's incredible. But there's always room. I want to bring this point out, Gary. This is a great place to say it. Improvement is an uphill climb. Anything worthwhile in life is an uphill climb. And if you take a day off, if you stop leading for a minute, or you stop working for a minute, you're going to slide backwards. What the governor is trying to do is what we should be doing every day in this police department, is that constantly committing ourselves to improvement and creating a culture of excellence where we're committed to improving ourselves every single day. You never arrive at excellence. You can always be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. It kind of folds into the next question, and I think we'll start this time with Chief Walsh.
Sure.
How do you feel about an open data policy for the Long Beach Police Department, meaning open and shared with the community, minus personal information? What type of information would you want to include in a data portal? And this is a community question.
Sure. Well, yes, I not only agree with an open data policy, why should we be hiding our data? It doesn't make sense to me. If the police department is supposed to be reflective of the community, and the community is supposed to be part of the police department, then they should know what we're doing. And if there's something in that data that we're embarrassed about, well, there you go. Back to your accountability question. We need to own it. We need to work on it. We need to fix it so that the data reflects the values of this community and of this department. Being authentic, being inclusive, being accountable, being transparent. Transparency right up front. We need to put our use of force on the website. We should put our data summonses on the website. We should put our car stop and field interview information on the website. You don't have to post people's information, but you can post how many field stops you did, in what neighborhood, and if it led to an arrest, and how it led to the arrest. All of that information is going to build legitimacy and trust with the police department in this community to raise the level of support. When you build trust, it's like the tide rising. This level of support comes across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. Commissioner Ragona, same question. How do you feel about the open data policy? Any drawbacks? And as far as open and shared, what type of information would you want to share with the community in a data portal?
Right. We're the police department. We have nothing to hide. As a matter of fact, one of the first things I did when I came in, I realized that we did not have name tags for the police officers. And I said, well, we're not hiding our names. And I came down with an order. Well, today, every one of our police officers has a name tag on. Why? Because we have nothing to hide. We're not doing anything wrong. And if you want to know who we are, it's your right to know who the police officer is. A small thing. As far as data goes, absolutely. The public has a right to see data. As you said, personal information on police officers, of course, no. That goes without saying. But as far as what we're doing police-wise, it should be out there. And as a matter of fact, we're working on something right now with my command staff in regards to getting that out there. I think it's a great idea. I think, and I know it builds public trust. And public trust is actually what community policing is based on. So if we can do that and get that out, I think it's just another step towards us strengthening our community policing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We're going to stick with you, Commissioner Ragona. Please tell us about your experience preparing and managing a sizable police budget. And then the follow-up is, how do you budget overtime? A big unknown. And then what's the commissioner's role in making sure whatever you budget, you stay on track?
So doing budgets for the police department is something I've done for many years, for the Long Beach Police Department. And how do you figure it out? It's always a difficult task. And it's my job, along with those that work with me, to sit down and figure it out. Salaries, well, we know what the salaries are. So when you talk about a straight time salary that's out there, overtime, well, we know through past experience in our city where our big overtime comes. And we know it comes in the summer. We know the weekends. We know if we do have the AOH festival, it's a big overtime day. There's certain festivals and parades, which are overtime days. So for an area our size, the overtime budget is not that difficult to at least estimate and put down. The problem arises when we're short manpower, which we are now. Then overtime rises because you have an unforeseen shortage of staffing. But all things being considered, we can do that. We can estimate the amount of overtime we're going to use pretty closely because we know how many police officers we have. We know how many we have to staff. It's X amount on each tour, how many supervisors, how many cops, etc. So it can be done, and we do it pretty accurately, and I've done it pretty accurately in the past. As far as our other lines go, we sit down together with my different department heads, and we figure out what they're going to need. What's our technical assistant response unit going to need for materials, for equipment, for supplies, and so forth? What does records need? We go through it, and I can tell you, looking at our budget and the budgets I've done, we're pretty accurate.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Chief Walsh,
Yeah.
tell us about your budget experience, managing a sizable police department budget, and how do you budget for overtime? And what's the commissioner's role in making sure that you're on track?
Sure. Well, since I've been a sergeant in the police department, my responsibilities have been to prepare the budgets for every place that I've ever been the leader of. I've been the leader of over 20 separate different units. Now I'm in charge of a very large division with a very large budget. So you figure out your budget. You could do a zero cost-based budget if you want, or you could do it based on last year's budgetary expenses. But the very first thing you have to do is start to analyze the need. You have to look at your operations and your efficiencies and look for productivity and efficiency. Can we do a better job? Is there and are there technological ways to complete a function that we've been doing with humans sitting behind a desk and doing calculations, figuring stuff out? Can that be automated? Can we leverage county resources? I know that right here in the city of Long Beach, we use Impact. That's the record management system when there's an arrest. There's a free one that Nassau County just went to called Motorola P1, Premier One. It's being offered to every village. Many villages are taking advantage of it because it eliminates cost and maintenance. I'd like to see that come to the city of Long Beach to save the taxpayers money, to reduce our budget. I just got done scoping out over the last year a $118 million project to redo the radios for Nassau County. Same radios that the city of Long Beach use. City of Long Beach is going to be getting an entirely new radio system along with Nassau County and all new radios at no additional cost to the taxpayers here because you have a headquarters tax and that's what pays for it. You have to leverage those opportunities to save this city money. When it comes down to overtime, part of that project and part of what I do every year is you look at your overtime expenses. I get a report every single week for every one of the units I'm responsible for. I analyze how much overtime is spent year to date, how much did we go up or down in the last week, what does that compare to last year, how are we trending, and then at the bottom of it, I get the report back from each one of the commanding officers for the reasons where their overtime is going up or down, and if there's ways to improve. And then every month, I sit down with them at least twice a month, each one of the COs of my units, and we walk through the data and we work on it because it's not our money. It's the taxpayer money. And we have to be responsible enough to know that it's not an open checkbook. It's something that we have to ensure that we're using prudently and responsibly. I have a tremendous amount of experience there. I was also on the Locust Valley School Board for 9 years, preparing their budgets, working on efficiencies and productivity there. I have a lot of experience in this, and I know that there's ways that we can be more productive and more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. And I think we're going to stay with you for this next question. You're going to get to go first.
Okay.
Interim Commissioner Ragona talked about hiring several new employees earlier today. And that's a short-term strategy, get folks in and get them hired. As far as a longer-term strategy of recruiting and retaining individuals, do you have any experience in programs that would help recruit and retain officers?
It's funny you asked that question, Gary. That's actually come to roost in the police department by a design that I helped to put in place 15 years ago. When I took over community affairs, I established the Law Enforcement Exploring Advisory Board. In Nassau County, we had what's called Law Enforcement Explorers. For those of you who don't know what that is, those are kids ages 13 through 20 years old who live in your community, and we bring them into the police department and we give them career and vocational training. And we mentor them and work with them. And they work with the police department to learn what we do. They learn how to do a crime scene investigation, how to respond to a call for service. They learn how they go through shoot, don't shoot scenarios and being responsible and having that presence of mind to make sure that you're 100% right every time you're going to do that. And what we have found is not only does that prevent kids from getting involved in other areas that are, let's just say, not productive, creates emissaries in the community, and those kids become Nassau County police officers. We mentor them through the process of becoming a police officer. We help them with the paperwork. We make sure that they stay on the straight and narrow and they don't do things in their life that are going to show up on their background investigation that can hurt them. We mentor them into college. We work with them. We ensure that they are doing the things necessary and having that ethical bearing to become a police officer. Why shouldn't this city leverage that and actually prevent the best and the brightest from leaving our community and joining other police departments? Nassau County and New York City and all the other villages. What about us? We should be feeding ourselves with our own youth, those own special people here who not only know this city, grew up in this city, care and love for this city, and want to see this city prosper. That's some of the experience that I have. I have a lot of other ones that I can go to, but I want to be respectful for the time left on the call.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn the same question to Interim Commissioner Ragona on recruiting and retention. You've done a great job recruiting and getting folks prepared to be hired. What about down the road a little bit, long term?
Right, so Chief Walsh has a lot of really good ideas of things county-wide that he does, and the county has done that have been very productive and have worked well. Within Long Beach, there are a lot of efforts that we've made. I was the head of our recruitment effort prior to retiring. I went out to our North Park community, the MLK Center. We recruited throughout minority communities. I personally went out and recruited in these communities. We went out to let them know what they could have, what this job entailed, what you need to do to get it, about taking the test. There's a whole host of issues. As far as getting these young adults when they're young and these kids, that Adopt-A-Cop program, the one I spoke about earlier, very important. If you could start reaching out in second grade and be a role model for these young people, well, they say, that's a pretty good job and that guy's a nice guy and I like that police officer and I trust him. Well, they'll grow up and they'll be a police officer. PAL, a big part of the police reform is getting involved in a PAL. We're in talks right now about starting our own police athletic league right here, I saw your face, in Long Beach. And in fact, that's a goal of mine. And what does that do? It brings kids who maybe don't have anywhere else to go together. So when I speak, I really don't speak in theory outside of our city. I'm asking to be the City of Long Beach Police Commissioner. So when I mention different things that should be done here, it's because this is what I'm concentrating on. There's a lot of really, really good programs in the county, outside the county, big budgets. I can speak about this city factually, what I'm doing, what we're doing here in the City of Long Beach, and we're in front of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Commissioner Ragona. Appreciate that. back to. All right. So this time I'm going to start with a question that for Commissioner Ragona. And this is a community question, of course. It starts with a statement, morale in the police department is low. What's your plan to boost morale if you have happy cops, you have a happy community?
Right. The old adage is, the police, you want to get a job done with a happy cop, but if not, you have to get it done with an unhappy cop. My goal is to get it done with a happy cop. So when I came back in June and I was going over what was going on here, one of the things I saw was there were 8 outstanding grievances, PBA against the city. A grievance goes through 3 separate steps, and ultimately it costs the city a lot of money to get to step 3, outside counsel, etc. Apparently there was an adversarial relationship between the police commissioner and the PBA. They couldn't seem to come to any common ground. I called the PBA president and I told him, let's take a look at the contract. The collective bargaining agreement is pretty clear to me. Let's go over all these grievances you have. Let's see if we can save the city money and we can come to some resolution. And by no means am I a yes man. I think we need a dialogue, and we have a dialogue. But we sat down and we hammered out a resolution to 1 improper practice and into 5 grievances that they had. I'm waiting to present it to Corporation Counsel for final approval, but it looks like the vast majority of these grievances, which cause low morale, are going to be resolved, and it's going to be cost neutral to the city. They were very minor issues that just didn't seem to get resolved. As far as the men and women of the department, they need to be led by example and by the front. I've showed up at every tour, the late night tour, the afternoon tour, the day tour, and I've addressed them. And I told them what my goal is. My goal is to make this department exactly what it always has been, the fine department that serves this city. And I think they buy into that. They understand that I'm sincere, and that's, my heart is here. For 34 plus years, my heart is with the city and with the police department. Their morale is improving. We're going to replace the officers who are missing. When police officers are short-staffed and they're required to work overtime, 2 or 3 of their days off, 14-hour days, not only do you have an unproductive police officer, you have a reactive police officer. You have someone who's not proactive. They're tired. They're not going out doing what they should do. They're answering the radio. So by staffing us adequately, by getting rid of the grievances, which I think were very easy to do, by having a very strong professional working relationship with our PBA, with having that mutual trust and understanding and working together, I see morale rising already, and it's only going to go up. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Commissioner Ragona. And with that, I think we're going to move to basically a closing statement. And we're going to start with Chief Walsh. You take five minutes or so and provide a closing statement.
Sure. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank everybody for coming out here this evening and joining the city and showing the interest. It's very heartwarming to know the numbers of people that are on this call because, well, yeah, Long Beach cares. You care about your community and you care about your police department. I've done a lot of talking here tonight. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see that my skills, my abilities, my talents, my education, my efforts are a good fit for this city. I know this city. I grew up down here. I've lived down here. I've worked down here. I can't tell you how much time, but it's not about that. What this is really about is creating a model city here, creating a model police department, one where the rest of the country looks at us and says, hey, wow, look at what Long Beach is doing. A learning organization, an organization where there's trust through and through, an organization where the police officers who, yeah, that community member is right. There's low morale right now. They need to come to work knowing that they're safe coming to work, not only from the community, but also inside the department. The department works with them to ensure that they feel safe coming to work. Beyond that, you need to have a dedicated culture of excellence here, one where we're always looking to improve. We never rest on our laurels, where we sit back and we say, oh, we're doing it good enough. And I know what's going on down there. I don't have to go and meet with them or any of those other things. I'm not talking theory here. What I'm talking is practice. I'm talking about the things that I do every single day to earn the trust of the people who work for me, because they know that when they come to me with a problem or an issue, it's not used against them. It's used as information that we use together to make decisions for the places that I'm responsible for, that I hold myself accountable for. The members of this community, when I become your commissioner of police, will be amazed to watch how close a relationship they will have with their police department. That those trust-based and resilient relationships in good times will get them through the most difficult of times, and that we'll work together. I want you all to take a moment just to imagine a city where crime is so low that you can leave your doors open at night, that your cars aren't being broken into, your bicycle is on the side of your house where you left it when you went to bed, where you don't have to walk through the train station and be worried about drugs being sold, where in North Park, when a cop comes down the street, the kids are running towards that police officer to say hello. How are you, Commissioner Walsh? That's how close we can be. Where information comes into the police department, and before there is data, there's solutions. We see problems before they become a pattern. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can feel my passion, and I hope you can see that this is not about a title to me. It's about actualizing a vision that the world needs to see come true. People have told me, oh, you're crazy, Ron, it'll never get that close. Everything is impossible until somebody does it. Last I checked, we walked on the moon. And in 2033, we're going to walk on Mars. We're going to do it, and we're going to do this here in this city. That's how important it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Walsh. Commissioner Ragona, closing.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, and thank you for doing such an excellent job as a moderator and posing these questions. I'll disagree with Chief Walsh when he said it's not theory. I believe pretty much everything about Long Beach, because he's not here, has been theory. As this whole process began, and I have to thank the city council, the city manager for doing the most thorough vetting and interview process that I believe the city has ever had for this position. And the city deserves that. There were many, many talented leaders in the law enforcement industry, including Chief Walsh. Very articulate, tremendous resumes, very respected in the law enforcement industry. There were 3-star chiefs in the city. And we went down through the process to where we are. Well, Chief Walsh tells many of us what his vision is for the city of Long Beach. I can tell you practically what I've done, and I'm living right now for the city of Long Beach. What we're doing to move ahead, it's unparalleled. We once in recent history have had a chief or commissioner who was a chief come over as our police commissioner. In the early 2000s, an NYPD chief, very well respected, very articulate, had a lot of vision, a lot of theory. He felt he knew what he could do with the city here. Full disclosure, he's still a good friend of mine and a good man. Well, he'll be the first to tell you the difficulties of coming over from a bigger job to this job with our nuances and how we operate. He lasted a very short time. Truly a failed experiment. I understand what we need to do and where we need to go, and I'm in the process of it. My foot's on the gas. We're moving forward. I know our residents and our residents know me. I know every department head in the city. Very important. When we need to get something done, I have the building department, the public works commissioner, sanitation, highway, all our hard work in CSEA departments on speed dial. We resolve problems and we do it quickly. We do it quickly because we trust each other. We know each other. We've been through the trenches together. To say I want to do a lot of things and start anew, it just doesn't make sense to me. It seems impractical. We're getting this job done. We're moving forward. And I think a change now would be very detrimental to the city. And actually, I believe having someone from a bigger job come to our city is not only not beneficial, it's detrimental. There's a tremendous amount of layers when you're a chief in a big department or a bigger department. I came in with 2 lieutenants under me. I rolled my sleeves up. Talk about not needing a desk. I don't need a desk. I'm out there every day, all day. I work 7 days a week. So as we're going this way, as Chief Walsh said, if I get the position, and I feel I would, we're going to continue to go this way. It's no time to stop. Progress is here. Let's not go backwards. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Interim Commissioner Ragona. And that is the conclusion of the questions. And so before I thank everybody, I don't want anyone to log off yet, because we are going to post a link to a SurveyMonkey survey where the community can provide feedback on the candidates. So if you just go to that link, www.surveymonkey.com/r/LB community. And please provide feedback. It's going to be used by the decision makers in this process, and it'd be very instructive and helpful pieces of information. So with that, having been said, I want to thank both Chief Ron Walsh and Interim Commissioner Phil Ragona. Nice job, gentlemen, and good luck to you, and thank you. And we're going to leave the...
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Certainly. And we're going to leave this up, this slide up for a few minutes, so please take it down or log on right now and give feedback on the survey. Thank you so much. And gentlemen, you're free to log off, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, and if we can just leave that up, Dave, we'll be good.
Okay.